Okay, so first of all, my name is Yumi Yoshikawa. Then normally I'm working for Chichibu distillery as a brand ambassador, but today we have Jota here as well. So I'm trying to be the Japanese whiskey's brand ambassador. And yay! Then first of all, who's been to Japan before? Oh, a lot. Oh, really? I've done, but I'm sorry about that. Maybe next time. I'm surprising to see a lot, and I'm familiar with some of your face at the Chichibu distillery. Then still, Japanese culture and history is in a mystery, I think, because it's far away from Europe or America, so it takes very long time to get there. It took about more than 15 hours from Tokyo to Stockholm. So then, me personally, I think the characteristic about Japanese whiskey making is mixture of the tradition and also the innovation. Of course, we're seeing the tradition very well as we are making whiskey in Chichibu distillery and Kirin distillery, Fujigotenba. Then also we are thinking about the innovation and development of the Japanese whiskey industry too. So first of all, I think Jota and Ichiro will talk about the innovation a lot. So I'm briefly talk about the Japanese whiskey history. Then, I'm sorry it's too small, but I think there are three big eras that Japanese whiskey industry has changed before. First time, that's 1918. Masataka Taketsuru, he's the founder of Nikka Distillery. He went to Scotland to learn how to make whiskey. So I can say that recently we've got so many questions. What is the difference between Japanese whiskey and Scotch whiskey? I can say that maybe 99% that's the same, from milling process to the distillation and maturation as well. But the environment is of course different. Then next time is 1923. I can say that this is the beginning of the Japanese whiskey making industry. That's Yamazaki Distillery was established. Then they started making whiskey from 1924. So he's the founder of Suntory, then founder of Nikka. Before, they were together making whiskey since 1924. But unfortunately, they separated, then worked for Nikka. I don't know what happened, but then I'm sure many of you have visited Suntory Yamazaki Distillery. It's down in Kyoto. And Nikka is up in the north, in Hokkaido area. Masataka Taketsuru said the Hokkaido, the environment is very similar to Scottish whiskey industry. Then, still many people thinking that Japanese whiskey history started recently and developing little by little. But do you know the number? What does it mean? Do you have any idea? Not yet. 120 million bottles. The Suntory was sold about 120 million bottles in 1981, then mostly consumed in Japan, which means in 1980s, we are a big whiskey drinker, like Taiwan nowadays. But unfortunately, before that, then 1969, Nikka started the Miyagi-Kyo distillery, then also Beam Suntory Hakushu distillery since 1973, and at the same time, Fujigotenba distillery started whiskey making. So whiskey was kind of booming that time in Japan. Then 1989 is coming up. That's the enforcement of tariff reduction by Thatcher. Yes. I don't mean I hate her, but I borrowed the photos. I'm sorry, Dave.
No, I hate her as well.
Then, of course, the price of Scotch whiskey and Japanese whiskey a little bit getting inexpensive. Then maybe people thought maybe everybody might be happy, but it was opposite. In Japanese people's point of view, whiskey was kind of long to drink, so they prefer to drink something expensive and quality stuff, but it became cheap stuff. Then they moved to wine or shochu. Then the whiskey was getting little by little old man's drink. like whiskey used to be in UK. Then the peak was 1981, but since 1989, the whiskey industry was reducing little by little. Then here, 2008, around 2007 was the bottom, I remember. Then Chichibu distillery was started, do you know guys? From 2008. So everybody thought Ichiro is kind of crazy guy. Why do you start making whiskey in Japan? Why don't you produce whiskey, shochu or wine or some other kind of Japanese sake? But he started making whiskey. And I think from now, Ichiro's talking about why he decided to making whiskey and also about his production and innovations too. Yeah, please, Ichiro.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Yumi. And my language problem, if necessary, Yumi will translate my English into better one. Okay? And let me talk about Chichibu distillery. This is Chichibu location. It's 2 hours away from Tokyo by car or by train. And the circumstances is very unique. This Chichibu is surrounded by mountains. Of course, in summer, temperature is high. In winter, very low, nearly minus 10 degrees Celsius. And our whiskey making process is almost the same as Scottish whiskey distilleries do. But our innovation is back to basic, back to tradition, and adding a small originality to it. For example, our washback is made of mizunara, or Japanese oak. And as you know, wooden washback gives more complexity to spirits wash because of lactic acid bacteria works after yeast. And some kind of lactic acid bacteria likes Douglas fir or Oregon pine, and other one likes mizunara, Japanese oak. Different type of tannin, and some researcher told me that. I believe it. And the other importance of our making process, we, as you know, whiskey in second distillation, we make middle cut. And we do it by nosing and tasting. Of course, we refer to time and alcohol strengths, but mainly we do it by nose and taste. In Japan, we don't have to lock the safe. It's a big advantage, I think. And this is our warehouse. It's also a traditional one, open soil and dunnage style. I think environment is a very important part of maturation. So I'd like to make our whiskey maturation very Chichibu. So I take this traditional warehouse. And also, this is a kind of a back to tradition. We harvest local barley in Chichibu. And we make the local barley, malted barley on site. And it is very labor-intensive work, but it is much fun because our people working at the distillery all whiskey enthusiasts. For the beginning, I told them we will start. I wanted to start make malt on site. All of them say yes, let's do it. But they are very intense, labor-intensive work. But they were really happy to hear that. And also, we make our own cask on site. We are fortunate enough to get all the machinery of coopering facility because Mr. Saito, Master Cooper, he is at his age of 86. He decided to stop cooperage, his own cooperage. And our staff and myself were making our own cask at his cooperage. Then I asked him to purchase all the facilities, and he said yes. And this is our cooperage. And still, the old Cooper, Master Cooper, trained our people. And charring inside of the cask. Then this is our first brand new cask made at Chichibu Cooperage. But this is made of white oak, American oak. And next, I tried to make our own cask from Mizunara, Japanese oak. We choose Mizunara in Hokkaido, then cut them into staves and dry it for at least 3 years, natural drying. Then we make it from Mizunara. Then it leaks. It is very difficult wood to make casks because the type of wood is different from white oak. This is white oak. There are a lot of vessels in the wood. And in white oak, the vessels, in the vessels, there are substance called tyrosis, which prevent water from passing through the wood. So it is very easy to make cask. But Mizunara, no tyrosis. Tyrosis type of oak, no tyrosis in the vessel. It is easy to leak. And I was so curious because at the timber market, the Mizunara is so expensive, especially good enough size of wood and straight wood, very, very expensive. And I was so curious that I asked a timber company to let me look around the oak forest. And I realized it is very difficult to find proper wood for casks. Next, I tried to split the wood by axe, very labor intensive. Yeah. And the wood is split along with vessels. So if this is twisted one and split along with vessels. If this wood cut by saw, vessels cut also, then the liquid inside the cask passing through it leaks. But split the wood, we can get the perfect wood, which doesn't leak. Like this is a wood. But it is this is a very experimental one, so labor extensive. Then we installed the splitter. Yeah, it's easier to split. Then we make a lot of rough stave and finish it into the light bars. Then we make Mizunara Japanese oak cask. And today we have Mizunara matured whiskey. It's a 8 years old one. Please try the Mizunara matured whiskey. And we make two different types of spirits, unpeated one and non-peated one. The Mizunara is non-peated one. And we also have peated one. Please try and compare the taste. And thank you very much. This is my presentation.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. From now, let me talk about our whiskey production in general. This is our distillery. As Yumi briefly introduced, this distillery was start operated in 1973, so it's been over 43, 44 years. Unlike many other Japanese distilleries, this distillery start producing not only Scotch-style whiskey, malt whiskey, but also other several different style of grain whiskeys by adopting not only Scottish malt whiskey production knowledge and know-how, but also all back then the most modern technology know-how equipment from US and also Canada's. Because of this distillery started because of a joint venture between the Kirin and the Seagram groups, including Sivas Brothers. That's why we had an advantage to get every dose knowledge. We didn't have to steal the Scottish knowledge by the Masataka Taketsuru a long time ago. We got that. So from the beginning, we've been producing different style of whiskeys. That's for blend. Well, our goal had been to produce whiskeys to suit to Japanese palate by making those and blends. So that's our style. So from the beginning, we're not trying to make a Scottish style, nor American or Canadians. Some of the stuff back then, we introduced like a Scotch style whiskeys, a peaty style and the other, Canadian style and bourbon style, but mainly we've been making the blends. The policy, this is our quality policy. Not only the equipment and know-how, we believe the important is our philosophy, basic policy, whatever you call it. What we try to make is clean, and estuary. That refers to the product with a hint of fruity floral stuff. No matter what the food or drink, have to be the savory good stuff has to be clean, nothing harsh, smooth on a palate, and more fruity, appealing floral. That's our policy to make that better quality. Just briefly, this is just pictures of pot stills. Right next to that pot still house, this is our grain equipment, multi-column standard style, and on the right-hand side, multi-columns, 5 columns. Start with beer column, and rectify and aldehyde columns and other stuff. That's very conventional. The other side and underneath, those are our equipment. This is beer column and then multi column, which I mentioned. This is kettle and doubler. Those are shiny, but inside all coppers. As you might know, the doubler, beer column and doubler combination, that's American bourbon style of making. We don't call bourbon, but we call, to respect bourbon, we do call domestic heavy style. We do make exactly the same way as they do, making that style of whiskey. And in the middle, that kettle, batch kettle, this imported, we adopted from Canada. This is not the continuous distillation, batch kettle. This kettle acts as like a pot still in conjunction with the rectifying column. That's how we make grain whiskey. Let's see. Speaking of grain whiskey, we call by flavor type heavy, which is like a bourbon style, which I briefly mentioned, with a beer column and doubler, using the new virgin oak, new charred oak, and aged in new charred oak. Medium, which is made by batch kettle, using or aged in the first fill ex-bourbon cask or second fill. The last one, a light style we call it, in a flavor type very delicate, which is like a conventional. This is the main grain whiskey for making the blends. I mean, the majority. This is the using multi-column, start with the beer column and other. For the aging, we do use second, third fill, more older barrel on purpose because of the delicacy we're trying to make. Well, let's see. Speaking of our uniqueness, for some reason, I had some title on every top, but this chart is our uniqueness. First of all, we're making variety of different type of whiskeys. That's for making the good blend to add more complexity and a balance. We try to make a different style of whiskey. I just mentioned the grain whiskey by types. Tomorrow, at the end of the session, I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about how we make those grain whiskeys. But on top of it, of course, we do make a different style of whiskey too. Today, I don't go much in detail, but heavily peated, light, medium peated, lightly peated, and non-peated, distilled by pot still. On top of it, we do distill, use batch kettle, like grain whiskey, using batch kettle with zero non-peated malt, so that we can get more delicate, soft style of malt whiskey. In Scotland, you cannot call malt whiskey because we don't use pot still, but we don't have that kind of strict regulations. So we call it malt whiskey, using batch kettle. That's the other style. The point is we are making different style of whiskeys on site. In the middle, that's just our history. Since we had only one distillery, we tried to make on-site everything, from mashing through blending and bottling, or both malt and grain whiskeys on site, so that the same person monitor everything from the bottom to the top, from top to the bottom, whatever you call it, every processes. That's the other uniqueness of it. The other thing is, I mentioned about how we distill it differently. The other thing is, of course, the reason why we built the distillery at the foot of Mount Fuji, excellent environment, the good source of water underground. It's very cold, not as cold as here, but we have a very high elevation and get cold in the winters. We do have some those, that's terroirs. That's what we want to take advantage of it. But on the other hand side, thinking about what we can do, by addition to appreciate and respect the environment, to take advantage of that environment, we can do something during the aging. That's what we call maturation peak management. This is in general. There's always the peak of maturation, food, drinks, but speaking of the whiskey in general, for example, bourbon style, in my opinion, bourbon gets matured, started at 5 years, then once it gets over 8 years old, start to lose the character. Of course, sometimes get richer and deeper in color. People love it, older than 8 years. But speaking of what's the bourbon style or character is, very fruity floral. Once it gets older, at some point, start to lose. So that's what I'm talking, kind of downslope. It depends on whom you talk to, and depends on your palate, or But in general, they're always peak. What we can do is we can control their peak by doing something. For example, size of a cask. Here you're doing a very good wise way for the custom bottling, like a quarter cask, 40 liters. What we do at the cooler climate in Japan, we do have, focus on just the regular bourbon barrel, 200 liters, by exporting instead of making the hogshead. Because of cooler climate, back then, that's the smallest without doing anything extra. 200 liter barrel. What we do, or once we import, we just fill in the casks. That's what we do. But the thing is, though, what we're doing is changing the filling strength, depending upon what putting into and what's the goal for each whiskeys. For malt, from the beginning, we fill malt whiskey into the cask at 50% to get more nice, sweety, nice aromatic characters. Although that's not economical. Many people say that, you need to buy more of the barrels. You need to have a larger area for the warehouse. But in order to make, maximize or get our goal of a style, we decided to do fill at 50% for the malt. The other stuff, grain whiskey, like a heavy style, we do fill 55% Oh, that's due to the change in the piece. I'm excusing. There's some that's format that it changes. So, but anyway, 50% for the malt, and some of the grain whiskey we fill into the cask at 55%. The other ones at 62%. Versus to, in Scotland, usually grain whiskey is, lack of a better term. So excuse me if I get, something offend you. Filler, grain considered as filler to make a blend a lot easier or more palatable. But for us, grain, we consider those are key flavor components. So we call some of the grains key grains. In order to maximize that character, we experiment with the filling strength, how we achieve it. So those are the filling strength we came up with. Of course, not only that, depend upon the style and also depend upon the curve or maturation. We change sometimes from one barrel to other barrel, from second fill to third, or new to bourbon. So that it's like a cooking, changing high heat to medium or low. That's during the maturation. Not always, but sometimes we change to get the character to the whiskey. That's how we do it. Maybe I'm talking too much. It's now time's up. So this is the end of my talk today. Then we want to welcome a question for Yumi, Ichiro, and me. Then inspire each other. So thank you so much. That's the end.
Thank you, guys. 3 fantastic presentations. Come on, back up on stage, otherwise they really, really don't want to look at me. Ichiro, Yumi, you have to come up. You have to have somebody with sense. Questions? Anybody got any questions? Yes. Okay. I'm going to multitask. Men are not good at this. Okay. Here we go.
Thank you. I have a question mostly to Yumi or Ichiro, sorry. 2 questions. The first one is, I've heard about some restriction on sourcing Mizunara cask from Ministry of Environment in Japan. So is that true? I mean, how many timbers a year you are able to source to make the cask? And the second question, if this is not top secret, how would you compare the price of Mizunara cask versus bourbon or sherry cask?
Yes. What type of oak we have in Japan? It's generally speaking only Mizunara. But other type called Konara could be used for making barrels. But flavor profile, Mizunara is the best, I think. It's to conserve the forest. We have to, how can I say, some amount of Mizunara have to be cut to grow younger wood. So it is strictly suggested by the authority in Kokuyurin, national parks or something like that. And we ask our wood supplier, they after they cut, they plant new trees. So I hope they will keep supplying us good Mizunara for a long time. And the second one, well, price comparing to sherry. I think much more expensive than sherry. And if I buy from cooperage in Japan, only one cooperage supply Japanese oak cask. It's probably 3 to 5 times higher than sherry bag. And as for me, I don't want to calculate how much it costs. If I know it, I give up to do it.
Thank you, Ichiro.
All right?
Louise.
Thank you. Ichiro, another question for
Yes.
you. In your maturation warehouse, you have in your maturation warehouse, you have just earth floor. And I have the same thing, and I'm just wondering, in terms of how it affects humidity or how it affects flavor, have you done any research on that, or can you anecdotally sort of elaborate on how that has affected positively or negatively the maturation process?
It's a good question. And I heard, only we don't have a research team. I visit often conference like this and listen to big companies personally. What do you think? Always I asking everyone. Then they have many opinions, but according to our experience, the damage or lacking style and all concrete floor it tends to drier than damage style, because it's open soil gives a moderate moisture and temperature control. So that's different. And probably in the future we can compare the taste.
I'd be quite interested to hear Joe.
Just opinion on that as well, because the warehouses at Gotemba were designed in they're very tall rack warehouses, but they were designed in a specific way to cope with or to try and generate a different kind of microclimate within that. Did you want to explain those big warehouses, Jota?
Yes, and also one important thing is Dutch terroir. The Gotemba, our elevation is 620 meters above sea level, but the humidity in summertime gets over 90%. It's good for whiskey, but not good for human to live there. Too much of moisture. But then anyway, at our warehouse, from bottom to the top, temperature variation, compared to Kentucky, others much smaller, but kind of 10-story high building, like a rack of 20 stories of barrels. Only one story, not multi-layers like a Kentucky's. So we try to unique or narrow the temperature variation, but the higher humidity, but the lower area, at the bottom, more humidity, so that we tend to lose the alcohol. We fill 50% into the cask for the malt. Once it gets over 15 years of age, sometimes, rare case, but close to 40%. We lose so much of alcohol. On the top, not go over, but still lose alcohol, but 50 get down to few percent. That's the difference. And of course, temperature difference for 5-6 years varies, even though we put the same quality of the same style of whiskey into it. Well, on purpose, we experiment all the time, from top to the bottom. From bottom to the top, we monitor. That's difference in the angel share, pretty much the same as the others, like a 2 to 3%, but tend to lose alcohol. That's I don't know if I'm answering to your question, but it depends on the area and also how you stock the barrels.
Time for, I don't know if this is working.
Time for one more question.
Hi. No. Okay. Hi. What do you do with the warehouses and earthquakes?
Oh.
Works for Japan and Iceland.
I was so worried when the big earthquake happened March 11, 2011. I was in the guest house, and the guest and I try to protect our whiskeys, like stop, like that. And after that, I ran into the warehouse, but no cask fell down. It was a pretty nice way to store casks. And in Chichibu, the earth is very stable. It's less shake than in Tokyo. It's the best place to store whiskey, I think.
Yeah, at the Kirin's case, our rock warehouse are very sturdy. When we built the warehouse, we know we're in the center of earthquake, so we built very sturdy iron or stainless steel. Racks, so that nothing we lost that 2011 the earthquake. If we do build another one down the road, probably we do add more extra structure, but nothing already. But the one highest risk is Mount Fuji. That's volcanic activity. That's for us more highest risk we take.
I always love the optimism of Japanese distillers. Build a distillery next to an active volcano, and right next to a Defence Force firing range as well. Also, I think this is an important question for any distillers who happen to be here from Washington State. So yeah, earthquakes and volcanoes are there as well. So it's an unusual topic. It's not something that necessarily you think about. Certainly in Scotland, I felt the earth move a few times, but not in that way. But please put your hands together for our first three panelists. They will be coming back at the end where we'll have a big discussion. Please put your hands together for.
Thank you. Thank you.